The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com. And the following are some complaints that were actually registered against some tour operators. So these are actually real complaints. On my holiday to Goa in India, I was disgusted to find that almost every restaurant served curry. The beach was too sandy. And one of my favorites, no one told us there would be fish in the water. As I have the opportunity to interact with people who are navigating through this life, there are lots of complaints. And the complaints usually show up around relationships, around health, and about work. So I thought it might be interesting to explore a little bit around strategies for how to navigate through work. And there are really four questions that I'd like to explore, kind of four inquiries. The first is around finding work that really aligns with your heart. The second is the art of balancing your life with your work-life balance. The third is to explore a little bit about taking on work as a spiritual practice. And the fourth is around shifting your relationship to work as an opportunity for service. These are all part of the classic teachings on right livelihood, and finding a way to serve and work in the world that's aligned for you and where you can contribute on a high level. So the first question to really ask yourself is your work aligned with your heart? When I thought about this, I remembered back when I was in high school, I took a course in architecture. And I didn't realize that I had to build a model house. So you had to, or a model building. So you had to choose a building and build it to scale. And I hated every second of that entire project. You know, the math and getting the scale, the design, the detail, the whole thing. And I chose for my model, my aunt and uncle had a fishing cottage in Maine with kind of the attached barn and the attached house. And I worked from some photographs and so forth. And I gave her the model for Christmas. And I told her right away, I said, I know you're going to throw this out tomorrow, and I have no problem with that. But I just want you to know, I hated doing this. And I'll never forget her response. She had this big smile on her face. And she said, "That's fantastic. Now you know you don't want to be an architect." She completely reframed my experience, because I was completely lost and feeling like I wasn't enough and I didn't do it well. And and with a certain sense of pride, I had realized I am not going to be an architect in this lifetime. So, and the question is, do you enjoy your work? Does your work fulfill you? Oftentimes when we're struggling in work, we're just coming to recognize that it's not our truest expression. The Buddha said that, he said, finding your dharma is your dharma. Finding your path is your path. And it's very important that we continue to explore and experiment and find out what works, what doesn't work. A really interesting exercise you can do is to write down, and I've led this a number of times, you make 2 columns on a sheet of paper and you write down on the left side everything you love to do. And I always tell people, put down food and sex first, just get it out of the way. You write down everything you love to do, and then in the second column, you brainstorm any possible way you could derive income doing anything related to what you love. It's actually a very interesting exercise because it kind of opens up the frame a little bit. Like, what do you enjoy? And it's a very interesting inquiry. Ken Wilber talked quite a bit about his first book, which was this breakthrough book. It took him, I think, 2 years to write his very, very first book that really launched him. And he had to make money. And for him, he found the perfect job washing dishes. Because it was a job that didn't require him to really think. And it actually allowed him to process all of his thoughts as he was writing his book. My brother is a forester in Maine. And he has a job where when he leaves, he completely drops the job so he can go home and be with his wife and his 3 kids and all of his other projects. And for him, that job is fully aligned with his values because he wants a job that he can do it and drop it and live the rest of his life. Others I know have a very strong desire to be engaged. They love having work that keeps them active and thinking and processing all the time. That level of engagement really resonates for them. So many people struggle around finding a work that's meaningful. They really don't know what's right. And I often find it helpful to actually make a list of what you don't want. I did this recently with someone, and she said, okay, well, I don't want to work alone because I don't work well with structure and I get isolated and I can't focus. And I don't want to do repetitive, mindless work. It just drives me crazy. And I don't want to feel like I'm just part of the supporting cast. So then we looked at the other side of that. And what she really wanted to do was to work with other people where she was collaborating and getting juiced. That she wanted work that was creative. And some work where she had responsibility, that she was in charge and not being a foot soldier. So that little exercise kind of helped her to really refine the criteria of the work that was the best expression for her. So finding work that really resonates is a challenging thing, but it's also an important thing. And for each one of us, it's a very individual expression. If you are in a deep inquiry about what your real work is, there's a very interesting little expression of that finding your dharma or finding your life work. You can think of it as what you can't not do. It's what would you do if you knew that whatever you were going to do would be an absolute success. And that can be an interesting way to open into that inquiry about a creative expression for your work in the world. And whether or not you have found your work, the work that really resonates for you, it's very important to ask yourself if your work is in balance with the rest of your life. The term work-life balance is kind of a popular way of assessing the quality of your life, having that sense of equilibrium between your professional work and your personal life. And finding that balance is really challenging. And again, I find certainly in this part of the country, So many of us find that balance completely out of whack, where work has just taken over. I had a friend who was deeply committed to creating safety and stability and abundance for his family. And so, in order to do that, he gave himself fully to his work. He volunteered for extra work. He took on more responsibility, and of course, he was loaded up with more responsibility. And for him, this was a very important value for him, being the provider and creating a real safe space for his family. But eventually, it started to slide out of balance. And he noticed that he started losing sleep. He wasn't sleeping well. He noticed that it started impacting his relationship with his wife and his kids. He would start to get more reactive. He started becoming more resentful, and particularly toward his wife, who was taking care of the kids and having fun and adventures with them, that resentment started running really, really deep. And eventually, the stress became so chronic that he had to stop and reassess his values. What was the most important thing for him? And it was quite a painful restructuring for himself to clarify what was actually the most important thing for him. On the other hand, I've had a number of conversations with people who feel like there's too much life and not enough work, that they don't feel engaged, they don't feel like they're contributing at a high level. There's missing something in their life expression. And so that begins another inquiry into finding meaning and contribution. So that balance is a very, very challenging thing to explore. One of the very top regrets of the dying is the regret that I spent too much time working and not enough time with my loved ones, not enough time enjoying. So finding balance brings us right back to the Buddhist teachings on the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose. And we can feel when it's off balance. That's when the complaining starts to kick in. I don't feel like I have meaning in my life, or I'm overwhelmed. Tom Peters, in his book In Search of Excellence, said that the paradox is that we all want to fit in, but we all want to stand out. And sort of recognizing that in our personal lives, that we want to belong to something, and yet we want to be special. We want to feel that we're contributing something unique. And dialing that in can be really, really challenging. And I'm kind of surprised, but no longer surprised, when I'm in conversations with people. And I ask the question, what would be most nourishing? How many people will say, I need more sleep? That's the number one thing. Or I have to get in nature. Oftentimes that's the number one thing. We begin to feel disconnected because we're so driven by all the different forces in our lives, all of the fears and anxieties and desires. So there are a few things that can be helpful in building in more balance in your life, particularly when you're deeply engaged into your commitments. There's a lot of stuff about habits that's out there now. And someone quite wisely sort of reframed habits as rituals. Creating a morning ritual can make all the difference. Just a morning ritual where you actually pause and take some time. And I've played with this for myself, to have a morning ritual where I have some movement, where I have some time to settle. And part of my morning ritual for myself is to pick out 3 things that are most important in this day. And I actually tell myself, if I get these 3 things done, it'll be a good day. And then to create a ritual of hitting the hardest things first. That's made a world of difference for me. To take the time to pause, sense what's most important, accomplish that first. There can be a tremendous sense of satisfaction, and rather than moving immediately into reacting to my life. Another very painful ritual I've created for myself is not to look at my iPhone until a certain hour. Have you noticed when you wake up and you take a look at your email, suddenly all the software programs of anxiety boot up instantly? Or if I go through my RSS reader and suddenly I'm reading a fascinating article about something that really has nothing to do with anything. So finding rituals, and it doesn't take much, can be a way to build in a little more life into your work. Another process that I've explored recently, I mentioned a book that I've read called Essentialism, which is about sort of brutally assessing where you spend your time and what actually adds value to your life. I found that to be very, very helpful as well. To really look at what could you cut out that might open up more time. And I've certainly found for myself that one of the big distractions for me, if you ever had that experience where you're kind of on the web and you're reading something really esoteric and you're thinking, how did I get here? And there are like 15 links back, leading back. And they've done so many studies now of what happens when you check Facebook or when you're going through your feeds, that there's actually a little endorphin rush, and it's actually a form of addiction. And when we're lost into that world, there's a lot of other stuff that's not happening that might happen. So engaging that ruthless assessment, because whatever you do, whatever activity you do, will result in one of 3 things. It'll give you energy, it'll deplete you on some level, or it'll be neutral. And going through that assessment, I have found to be really, really helpful. The third thing to mention that can be part of this skillful means is to look at what you could outsource. What are you doing that someone else might be doing that might make a difference for you? I grew up in a household where you take care of your own lawn. And not too long ago, we kind of switched to bringing in someone to do the lawn. It's amazing. There's this SWAT team shows up every 2 weeks. It's like this truck backs up and it's like, go, 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 go. And this team does in 20 minutes what would take me 2 hours. And it's really kind of a joyful experience to watch. Somewhat indulgent, but it's like, wow, isn't that cool? I have a friend who is a doctor, local doctor, and he spent a huge amount of time going to seminars in being an entrepreneur. And he said, let me just sum it up for you. The whole trick, find out what you do best and don't do anything else. And there's something about that that's so interesting, again, to sort of examine in your life. What could you outsource that would free you up to do what you most love? So finding that balance, Most of us have to work. And we have some control over our externals of where we work and who we work with and what we do. But really, mostly what you have control over is your internals, how you relate to the work that you're doing. And this is how you can explore your work as a spiritual practice. I think I had mentioned in the past there's a men's group, M3, Men Meeting for Meditation. They're actually meeting tonight. And part of their sharing is they go around the circle after they meditate and they talk about their AFGOs, AFGO, which stands for another freaking growth opportunity. And that's what meditation practice is all about. When you sit and you slow down and you pay attention, you begin to see what's between you and feeling happy. You begin to see what's between you and feeling free. That becomes more and more evident, which sort of leads us to the possibility of freedom where it didn't exist before. By naming what's there, by investigating what it is and how we're holding it, the patterns, our thoughts, our beliefs, tremendous amount of freedom can result from that. In that same way, when we begin to explore our relationship to work and our relationship to the relationships in work, and explore our beliefs, explore how we're holding back, et cetera, it can be quite freeing. So one of the main pieces we run against is doubt. And I wanted to share a reading from Katie Whalen, who lived here in D.C. for quite a few years. She worked on Capitol Hill. She's part of the Insight Meditation community and was part of the Year of Living Mindfully community as well. And she left the work that she loved on Capitol Hill to pursue her dream, to be a full-time writer. So she's now living in Brooklyn, and she writes a blog called The Lightning Notes. And this is a little piece that she wrote about doubt. She called this a bout of doubt. The doubt nearly crippled me. The job description was a long list of qualifications I didn't have. Part of it was in a language I didn't speak. I was way past a long shot. Why even waste my time on a cover letter? I stared at the blank page. Doubt is a traitorous co-pilot. But despite terrible credentials, doubt is by my side more often than not. When I start to get out on a limb, doubt is right there with me, questioning, undercutting, occasionally smothering. Where there is uncertainty of any kind, there will be some doubt. I reread the job description. I reread my best friend's translation of the sentence in Spanish. Must be able to speak Spanish. I had nothing for that blank page. There is just one line I remember from Measure for Measure. Our doubts are traitors and make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. I have disqualified myself too many times in the name of doubt. I typed my home address on the blank page. There is more I can't do than I can. But that misses the point. Because what I can do is attempt with honesty and guts. I don't speak Spanish, I typed, but I will learn. If I don't get it, I'll be bent out of shape, but I won't be broken. And I'll have respected myself. I'll have respected that untamed part of me that wanted to go for this uncertainty. 3 weeks later, I got the job. They paid me to take Spanish lessons. So what would happen if you viewed your work as spiritual practice? we often talk about the hindrances, the 5 mind states that arise when things aren't going your way. They occur in meditation where we can see them clearly, and they occur in real life when we can't see them so clearly because we react. And these are the different flavors of anger, of ill will, of hatred, of blame, the different flavors of planning, of sort of disassociating mentally, getting trapped in worry and anxiety and a restless mind, the qualities of sloth and torpor, where we sort of disengage and spiral down into a kind of a depressive state. And then this quality of doubt, or being paralyzed by self-criticism. And there's no doubt that our work in the world, our relationships in the world, bring all of these states to the forefront. You get to see your patterns, your attempts to control, your attempts to avoid domination. And they can be tremendous tools for transformation. Another element that becomes very clear when you engage consciously into work as a spiritual practice is you begin to see the 8 worldly winds. As you make your way through this life, there are 8 winds that are constantly buffeting at you. And they affect your relationships, they affect your work. Your desire for success and the fear of failure. The desire for fame and the fear of blame. The desire for gain and the fear of loss. And the desire for happiness and the fear of despair. When we are driven by these 8 worldly winds and they are unconscious, they can dramatically limit your capacity for happiness. Many, many successful people are driven by an almost insane fear of failure. There's never any sense of being able to relax or savor the moment because of that fear. So work can be a tremendous source of growth. You get to see your deepest challenges as opportunities for mastery. There was a time when I felt so shut down at work and so disengaged and so paralyzed by doubt that I never spoke up because I was so caught by that sense of self-criticism. And it became more and more chronic, that it was really intolerable for me. And I sort of got that underneath sort of the depression of my disengagement was a very deep anger, a real deep sense of resentment. And as I was meditating on this, something out of a real sense of like inner rage just came up, and I just said to myself, I'm going to be me until they fire me. And so in a meeting, when something would come up, I would just speak my mind. If I didn't agree the direction we were going in, I would say something. And the biggest shock, and it was truly a shock, was how much everyone enjoyed how I was showing up. And I couldn't quite believe it. But there was a sense of like, welcome back wherever you were. It was quite a transformational moment for me to see my patterns of self-doubt, my patterns of being paralyzed by that critic, and how they were holding me back from my real aliveness. That's not to say you should just start saying what you think. So moderation in all things, including moderation. But for me, that was a very, very powerful edge, and it really changed my whole attitude toward life, to really risk being myself and then see what happens. So it becomes a very, very interesting inquiry to ask yourself, what are your complaints about your work? And to look at the beliefs that might be underneath those and really ask yourself if those are true. To really sense what it's like to be limited by those beliefs and ask yourself who you are without them. That's the possibility of how work can be an opportunity for transformation. The other big reframe that I experience in my relationship with work is looking at my internal attitude. I had the good fortune to quote unquote work for many years in a spiritual community, in an ashram. And I remember reading an article that said, to get ahead in business, make your boss look good. I thought, well, that's interesting. And as I thought about that, I thought, well, what if I did that? What if I shifted from what's in it for me, and as you may know, I think it was Dale Carnegie who said, everyone is listening to the same radio station, WIFM. What's in it for me? What if I shifted from what's in it for me to how can I support those around me? We explored a lot in the ashram of the principle of seva, S-E-V-A, which translates literally as selfless service. How can you serve freely without any sense of self-gratification? So I took that on as sort of a practice. I'm here to make my boss look good. And what I found was a generosity immediately emerged. I got to ask myself, does his vision match with mine? And it did, for the most part. So I found myself moving from sort of a self-protective maybe to just saying yes. And there was something quite powerful about what that unleashed inside myself. So when you practice seva, you are practicing what it means to give freely without expectation of results. And it is a practice. It's a philosophy of life. It's a way to explore moving through life, and it's summarized quite well by the book that Ram Dass wrote a couple books back. And the title of the book is called "How Can I Help?" It's taking that attitude, how can I help? Now, of course, there's balance in everything. Because quite often, how can I help can be, here are the 10,000 things I'd like you to do, and you get lost in trying to make everyone happy and losing a sense of self, and your work-life balance is completely shot. But it can be quite interesting to take that on as a practice. It can be really quite touching. So a little story for you. A woman in a supermarket is followed by a grandfather and his badly behaved 3-year-old grandson. It's obvious to her that he has his hands full with the child screaming for sweets and biscuits, you name it. Meanwhile, Grandpa is working away his around, saying in a controlled voice, "Easy, William, it won't be long. Easy, boy." Another outburst, and she hears Grandpa calmly say, "It's okay, William. Just a couple more minutes and we'll be out of here. Hang in there, boy." At the checkout, this little terror is throwing items out the cart, and Grandpa says again in a controlled voice, William, relax, buddy. Don't get upset. We'll be home in 5 minutes. Stay cool, William." And very impressed, the woman goes outside where the grandfather is loading groceries and the boy into the car. And she says to the elderly man, It's none of my business, but you were amazing in there. I don't know how you did it. That whole time you kept your composure, and no matter how loud and how disruptive he became, you just calmly kept saying things would be okay. William is very lucky to have you as his grandfather. Thanks, said the grandfather, but my name is William. This little jerk is Kevin. So when we take on the ideal of service, it's very important to recognize that there are limitations. We have to look towards self-care at the same time. So when it comes to right livelihood, there are 4 questions that you can ask yourself. And the first is your work aligned with your heart? Is what you're doing a match for what you want in this life? And to ask yourself, do you have balance in your life? To do an honest assessment of the quality of your life and to sense what might need adjusting, to find that balance between savoring and serving. One of my favorite quotes has really been kind of a guiding star for me, is from E.B. White, who said, "I wake up each day torn between a desire to serve the world and to savor it. This makes it difficult to plan the day." A third question to ask yourself is it possible to reframe your work as spiritual practice? And to accept the challenges as opportunities for growth, and to see your challenges as opportunity for developing mastery. And the fourth inquiry is, how can you transform your work into an opportunity to practice service? What would that feel like inside? Thank you again. Thanks for coming out. Have a wonderful evening. I'll be back next week as well. We have tea and cookies and stuff like that waiting for you as well. Great. Have a great evening and beyond.